Tom had always liked to walk alone in the forest after work. It made him feel calm, away from the noise of the small town. That evening, the air was cool, and the sky was turning dark blue. He carried a small backpack with a bottle of water and a flashlight. The tall pine trees stood like silent watchers as he followed the narrow trail. He was thinking about how quiet everything was when a bright light flashed above the trees. It was so sudden and strong that Tom stopped walking. He raised his hand to shield his eyes. The light grew bigger, and then there was a loud whooshing sound, like something tearing through the air. A glowing object shot across the sky and crashed somewhere deeper in the forest. The ground shook under Tom's feet. A gust of warm wind rushed past him, making the leaves swirl. His heart began to pound. It looked like a meteor, but he had never seen anything so bright. Part of him wanted to turn around and go home. Maybe he could pretend he hadn't seen it. But the other part of him, the part that fixed broken machines for a living, was curious. If something had fallen, someone might be hurt. Tom took a deep breath and started moving toward the place where the light had vanished. The trees grew thicker, and broken branches littered the ground. After walking for several minutes, he smelled smoke and something sharp, like burned metal. He pushed through a tangle of bushes and stopped when he saw a clearing that hadn't been there before. In the middle of the clearing lay a large, strange object. It was shaped like an egg, but it was made of silver metal. Pieces had broken off, and bright blue liquid dripped onto the grass. Sparks jumped and danced across the surface. Tom stepped carefully around it, trying not to touch anything. He didn't want to get burned or shocked. Then he noticed a small figure lying near the edge of the wreck. At first, he thought it was a child. He rushed closer and saw that it wasn't exactly human. The figure had smooth silver skin that shimmered under the last rays of sunlight. Its hair was thin and white, almost like silk. The arms were too long for a child, and the eyes were closed, the eyelids glowing faint blue. Tom dropped to his knees beside the figure. His hands shook as he reached out to check if it was breathing. He felt a faint rise and fall in the chest. Relief flooded through him. Whoever or whatever this was, it was still alive. He looked back at the broken ship. Sparks were still popping, and the smell of burning metal was growing stronger. He knew he couldn't leave it here. Someone else might come, and they might not be kind. He gently touched the figure's shoulder. The skin felt warm and soft. The eyelids fluttered and then slowly opened. Two big blue eyes looked up at him, full of confusion and fear. Tom held up his hands to show he meant no harm. He spoke softly, though he knew the being might not understand him. "It's okay. You're safe. I'm going to help you." The eyes blinked and the small mouth opened. A soft musical sound came out, like singing mixed with words. Tom couldn't understand, but he nodded, hoping it would show he was friendly. He pointed at himself and said, "Tom." The figure watched his mouth move. Then it pointed weakly at its own chest and said something that sounded like Mira. "Myra," Tom repeated carefully. The being closed its eyes again, as if tired by the effort. He looked around. Night was falling fast, and the cold would come soon. He couldn't leave Myra out here. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around her small body. She felt lighter than he expected when he lifted her into his arms. He took one last look at the broken ship. He would come back later to see what could be salvaged. For now, getting Mira somewhere safe was more important. Tom carried her back through the trees, moving as quickly as he could without dropping her. The weight pressed against his arms, but he didn't stop. In the distance, he heard a faint siren. Someone must have seen the crash. He needed to be gone before they reached the clearing. After what felt like forever, he reached the edge of the forest where his old blue truck was parked. He opened the passenger door and laid Mira gently on the seat. She made a soft sound, but her eyes stayed closed. He covered her with a blanket from the back seat and checked her breathing again. It was steady but slow. Tom climbed behind the wheel, started the engine, and drove toward his workshop on the outskirts of town. The roads were empty. He kept glancing over to make sure she was still there. He couldn't believe what was happening. Less than an hour ago, he had been thinking about fixing engines and paying bills. Now he was driving through the dark with a small alien in his truck. When he reached the workshop, he pulled around to the back so no one would see them. He opened the door and carried Mira inside. He laid her on a soft pile of old blankets in the corner, away from the windows. He turned on a lamp and looked around. The workshop was full of tools and spare parts. It smelled like oil and metal. But it was warm and it was safe. Tom sat down on the floor beside her. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her alone. He would help her, no matter what it took. Mira stirred and opened her eyes again. They glowed softly in the dim light. She looked at Tom with a tired, questioning expression. He didn't have answers yet, but he nodded slowly to show he was here. He reached out and gently took her hand. She did not pull away. Outside, the night grew darker. Inside the workshop, Tom sat with the lost visitor from the stars, feeling that this moment had changed his life forever. Tom did not sleep at all that night. He stayed near Mira, listening to her slow breathing and wondering what he had brought into his life. From time to time, she opened her eyes and looked around the workshop, then closed them again. Her skin seemed less bright now, but she looked peaceful, as if she trusted him. When the first gray light of dawn came through the windows, Tom got up and stretched his tired arms. He needed to think clearly. He knew the authorities would be searching for the crash site. If they found Myra's ship, they might follow tracks or clues straight to him. And if they saw her, he did not know what they would do. He had read stories about secret government labs and people disappearing. He could not let that happen. Tom poured himself a cup of black coffee and stood by the window, looking out at the dirt road, no cars yet. He took a deep breath and turned back to Myra. She was awake now, propped up on her elbow, watching him closely. He felt a strange calm when he met her bright blue eyes. "Morning," he said softly. He pointed to himself again. "Tom." Then he pointed at her. "Myra." She nodded very slowly. Her silver fingers brushed her forehead. Tom guessed she was still hurt. He wanted to help, but he did not know how. He opened his toolbox and searched for something he could use. After a moment, he picked up a small flashlight and an old notebook. Maybe if he could understand what she needed, he could do something useful. He sat cross-legged on the floor beside her. Mira looked at the notebook with curiosity. Tom drew a simple picture of her ship, an oval shape with smoke coming out. He pointed to it, then pointed outside. She watched his hands. Then she lifted her hand weakly and traced a circle over her heart. Her voice was soft and musical, but he could not understand the words. Still, she sounded worried. Tom turned the page and drew another picture. 2 stick figures, one small, one tall, holding hands. He tapped the small one, then her. Mira studied the drawing and made a sound like a sigh. Her eyes grew wet. She lifted her hand and made a motion like a wave going up to the sky. Tom guessed she was trying to say her family was far away. He felt a heavy sadness in his chest. She was alone here, just as lost as he would be on her planet. He closed the notebook and nodded. He would help her find her way home. Before he could think more, a noise outside made him freeze. A vehicle was coming up the dirt road. Tom quickly turned off the lamp and ducked beside the window. A white van with government markings rolled past the workshop, moving slowly. 2 men in uniform sat in the front seats, scanning the area with small handheld devices. One of them pointed toward the trees behind the building. The other spoke into a radio. Tom's heart beat faster. He looked back at Mira. She was watching him with wide eyes. He pressed his finger to his lips to tell her to stay quiet. She nodded. and pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders. The van stopped for a moment. One of the men stepped out and looked around. Tom held his breath. Then the man climbed back inside, and the van continued down the road. Tom waited until it was out of sight before he exhaled, that he knew it was only a matter of time before they searched every building nearby. He needed to move Mira and the pieces of her ship somewhere safer. But first, he had to check her injuries. He turned on a small work lamp and picked up a clean rag and a bowl of warm water. He showed Mira what he was doing so she wouldn't be afraid. Gently, he wiped the dirt and dried blue liquid from her arms. She winced once, but then relaxed. Under the grime, her skin looked smooth and shiny again. As he worked, she watched him with an expression he could not quite read. He wondered what she thought of him, this human who had found her in the forest. Did she understand that he wanted to protect her? He hoped so. When he finished cleaning her wounds, she reached toward her collar. There was a small metal clasp there, half broken. Carefully she pulled out a thin, round device no bigger than a coin. The center glowed a dull blue. She held it out to him. Tom took it gently. He turned it over in his hand. It was light, and the surface was warm. Mira tapped her finger against her temple, then pointed at the device. Tom guessed it might be some kind of translator. He tried pressing the center gently. A soft hum filled the air. A tiny beam of light shot out, displaying floating symbols. He couldn't read. Mira looked frustrated. She tried to speak, but only more musical sounds came out. The device flickered and dimmed. "Broken," Tom whispered. He looked around his workshop, searching for anything that might help. He had wires, soldering tools, and small batteries. Maybe he could fix it. He motioned for Mira to rest. She lay back, her eyes never leaving the little device. For the next hour, Tom worked at his bench, carefully opening the tiny translator. Inside were delicate circuits finer than any human technology he had ever seen. He cleaned the connections and replaced a cracked wire with a thin copper strand. When he pressed the power again, the blue glow grew brighter. He carried the device back to Mira and showed her. She took it in her hands and pressed it to her throat. A soft chime rang out. She closed her eyes and spoke. This time, Tom heard a voice in his language, soft and clear. "Thank you." Tom, his eyes widened. "You can understand me?" "Yes," Mira said, her voice still sounding gentle and far away. "This helps." "A little." Tom felt a surge of relief. "You're hurt. Are you in pain?" "Some pain," she whispered. "I must find my family." He nodded. "We will, but we have to hide you. People are looking." She closed her eyes and breathed slowly. "I trust you." Tom felt the words sink deep into his heart. He knew he could not fail her now. He would keep her safe. No matter who came searching, he would not let them take her. Outside, the morning grew brighter. But inside the workshop, Tom was already planning their next move. The morning passed slowly, each hour feeling longer than the last. Tom knew he couldn't keep Mira hidden in the workshop for much longer. The men in the white van would come back. He kept peeking out the window, half expecting them to knock on the door and ask questions he could not answer. Inside, the air was quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Mira was awake and sitting up now, her silver skin looking a little healthier. She held the small translator gently in her hands, as if it were the most precious thing she owned. Tom knelt beside her, trying to think of what to say. He wanted to ask where she came from and how he could help, but he didn't know if the translator would work long enough to explain everything. He looked into her blue eyes and spoke slowly. "Do you remember how you crashed?" Mira touched her chest with one slender hand. The translator made a soft sound, then her voice came through, faint but clear. "I was traveling with my family. A storm in space pushed my ship away. I tried to control it, but systems failed." Tom nodded, trying to understand. "Your family, they think you're gone?" Her eyes turned sad. the glow in them dimming. Yes, they will believe I am dead. He felt a tightness in his chest. She was just a young traveler who had lost everything in a moment. He wanted to promise her that everything would be all right, but he wasn't sure himself. Mira lifted the translator again. I must call them. The beacon in my ship is broken. Tom stood and walked to the workbench where he had placed some parts he'd gathered from the wreck the night before. Most were twisted or burned. He picked up a small silver cube that had tiny lights on one side. Mira's eyes widened when she saw it. She reached out quickly, and he handed it to her. This is part of the beacon? He asked. She nodded. Yes. But it does not work alone. Tom rubbed the back of his neck. I can try to fix it, but I need time. And we need to stay hidden. Mira looked worried. People will come. Yes, Tom agreed. That's why we must be careful. He sat down at the bench and spread the broken parts in front of him. The cube had a cracked panel, but he could see small connectors inside. Maybe if he could power it, it would send some kind of signal. He didn't know how far it would reach, but it was better than doing nothing. While he worked, Mira watched silently. Sometimes she closed her eyes, looking tired. Sometimes she studied his hands with curiosity. Tom thought about how strange this all was, two beings from different worlds, sitting together in a dusty workshop. But somehow it felt right. After an hour, he managed to connect a thin wire from the cube to a small battery pack. He pressed a button on the side. The lights on the cube flickered weakly. Mira leaned forward, hope shining on her face. It works? She asked softly. Tom shook his head. Not yet. I think it needs more power, and maybe a signal amplifier. He thought for a moment, then remembered an old radio he kept in the storage shed behind the workshop. It was broken, but maybe he could take parts from it. He stood up and grabbed his keys. I'll be right back, he said. Stay here and keep quiet. Mira nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Tom stepped outside and looked around carefully. The road was empty, but he still felt nervous. He hurried across the yard to the shed and pushed the door open. The radio was on a high shelf. He climbed up, pulled it down, and carried it back inside. When he came back into the workshop, Mira was still there, sitting quietly. She looked relieved when she saw him. Tom smiled a little, trying to make her feel safe. He set the radio on the bench and began taking it apart. Mira watched every move he made. Her translator clicked softly as she tried to find words. You fix things, she said. Tom chuckled. Yes, that's my job. I repair engines, machines, anything that breaks. You are. Good, Mira said softly. He felt a warm feeling in his chest. No one had ever looked at him the way she did, as if he were something more than an ordinary man. After a while, he found the amplifier circuit he needed. He connected it to the cube carefully, his hand steady despite how fast his heart was beating. He pressed the button again. This time, the lights glowed brighter. A soft hum filled the air. Mira's eyes lit up with hope. It is ready, she whispered. Tom watched her place her hand over the cube. She closed her eyes, and a bright blue light shone from her palm into the device. The hum grew louder, then faded. Mira opened her eyes again, and he saw tears shining there. The message is sent, she said. My family will hear. Tom let out a long breath. That's good. Really good. Mira looked at him, her voice trembling. You saved me. He shook his head. I just did what anyone would do. No, she said firmly. You did more. Before Tom could answer, the sound of an engine came from the road. He froze, listening. A moment later, he heard footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. Mira tensed, her glowing eyes wide. Tom quickly turned off the lights and pulled the curtain shut. He motioned for Mira to stay low behind the workbench. She obeyed without a word. Someone knocked on the door. Hello? A man's voice called. "This is Officer Dale with the local authorities. We're looking for any information about last night's meteor." "May I come in?" Tom swallowed hard. His heart pounded in his ears. He looked at Mira, then back at the door. "No," he whispered to himself. "Not yet." He took a deep breath and stepped forward to face whatever came next. Tom stood completely still, staring at the door where the officer had knocked. His heart beat so loud he thought the man outside might hear it. He knew he could not let anyone come inside. If they saw Mira, everything would be over. She would be taken away, and he would never forgive himself. He looked back at Mira, who was crouched behind the workbench. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the dim light. Her blue eyes were wide with fear. Tom pressed his finger to his lips, telling her to stay quiet. She nodded without making a sound. "Hello?" Officer Dale called again. His voice was friendly, but firm. "We just want to ask a few questions." Tom took a deep breath and walked slowly to the door. He turned the lock but did not open it. His voice shook a little when he spoke. "I'm here," he called through the door. "I haven't seen anything. I was asleep." There was a pause. Tom could almost feel the officer thinking about whether he believed the answer. "We have reports of a large impact nearby," the man said. A bright object fell from the sky. "Are you sure you didn't hear or see anything unusual?" Tom swallowed. "No, sir, I didn't." Another long silence. Tom held his breath. Finally, he heard the officer step away. "All right," the voice said. "If you do see anything, please call this number." A small card slid under the door. Tom waited, listening. Footsteps crunched away, then the engine started. He peeked through the curtain and watched the patrol truck roll down the road until it disappeared behind the trees. He let out a shaky sigh and locked the door again. Mira slowly stood up, her hands trembling. "They will come back," she whispered. Tom nodded. "I know." He paced the workshop, thinking fast. It wasn't safe here anymore. He needed to move Myra and the ship's parts somewhere no one would look. He remembered the old barn deep in the woods behind his property. No one had used it in years. The roof leaked, and the walls were covered in vines, but it was hidden. He turned to Mira. "I have a place," he said. "It's far. We can hide there." Her eyes looked hopeful. "Safe? Yes," he said firmly. "But we have to go. Soon." He gathered a few tools and supplies, flashlights, batteries, rope, and a tarp. Then he walked over to the corner where the cube beacon lay. Mira picked it up carefully, holding it against her chest as if she was afraid it might vanish. We'll bring this," Tom said. "Your family might come for you. They will need to find you." Mira nodded. Tom went outside to start the truck. He kept the engine low so no one would hear. Then he returned to Mira and held out his hand. She placed her small silver hand in his. The trust in her eyes made him feel strong, like he could protect her no matter what. They slipped out the back door and moved quickly across the yard. Mira walked slowly, still weak from her injuries. Tom supported her with one arm around her shoulders. At the edge of the trees, he paused to look back at the workshop. Part of him hated to leave it behind, but he knew there was no choice. Reached the truck, and Tom helped Mira climb into the passenger seat. He covered her with the old blanket so no one would see her if they passed by. Then he drove down the narrow path that led into the forest. The road was rough, full of bumps and roots, but he kept going. He needed to get as far away as possible. After almost an hour, the trees opened into a clearing. The barn stood in the center, leaning to one side. The wooden boards were faded and broken in places, but it was hidden by tall grass and thick vines. Tom parked behind it and turned off the engine. "We're here," he said softly. He helped Mira out of the truck. She looked up at the barn, her expression uncertain. "It doesn't look like much," Tom admitted, "but no one comes here. You'll be safe." He pushed open the big doors, and the smell of old hay and damp wood filled the air. Sunlight streamed through holes in the roof, casting long stripes across the dusty floor. He guided Mira inside and led her to a dry corner. "Sit here," he said gently. "I'll get everything." He made several trips back and forth to carry the supplies. Mira watched quietly. When he brought in the beacon, she smiled weakly. Grateful," she said in her soft voice. Tom felt something warm in his chest. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You'd do the same if I were in your place." She tilted her head, thinking, "I would try." Tom couldn't help smiling. After they settled, he took the tarp and covered the broken parts of the beacon to keep them safe from rain. He stacked old crates in front of the barn doors so no one could peek inside. When he was done, he sat on the floor beside Mira. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves. Birds chirped in the trees, unaware of the strange secret hidden in the old barn. Mira finally spoke again. "How long will we stay?" "Until it's safe," Tom said. "Maybe a few days, maybe longer." She looked tired but calmer. "You are not afraid?" He thought about that. "I am," he admitted. "But I'm more afraid of what would happen to you if I did nothing." Mira reached out and touched his hand. Her skin felt warm and smooth. "You have good heart," she said. Tom looked into her shining blue eyes and felt something shift inside him. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. He would protect Mira, no matter the cost. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. In the hidden barn, a human and an alien sat together, bound by trust and something like hope. And as the first stars appeared overhead, Tom began to believe that maybe this was exactly where he was meant to be. The old barn was silent, except for the sound of the wind moving through the cracks in the boards. Tom sat on the cold wooden floor, leaning against the wall. He was tired, but his mind was too full of questions to rest. He kept glancing over at Mira, who was curled up under the blanket, the small beacon held close to her chest like a treasure. It had been 2 days since they came to the barn. Tom made trips back to his workshop at night to bring more supplies, food, water, tools, and to check that no one had broken in. So far, the authorities hadn't returned, but he knew it was only a matter of time before someone started asking more questions. That evening, he sat by the open barn door, watching the sky. The sun was nearly gone, and the first stars began to appear, bright pinpricks against the deep blue. He wondered if Mira's family was up there, searching for her. He hoped they would come soon. Behind him, Mira stirred. Her blue eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. She pushed back the blanket and slowly sat up. "Tom," she said in her soft voice, "the beacon has power." He turned to look at her. "What does that mean?" "It is ready to guide them," she said. "If they are close, they will find me." Tom felt something tighten in his chest. Part of him was glad. He wanted her to be safe, to go home to her family. But another part of him was afraid of what would happen when they arrived. What if they saw him as an enemy? What if they took her and never let him explain? He shook the thoughts away. Helping Mira was the right thing to do, even if it meant letting her go. She looked down at the beacon and touched the center. The small lights along the edge glowed bright blue. A low hum filled the barn, vibrating in the air. Tom stood and came closer. "Is it working?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "The signal is strong now." They stood side by side, listening to the hum. For a moment, Tom imagined he could almost hear voices in its strange, musical sounds that made his skin prickle. Mira closed her eyes, her face calm. "They will hear," she said. "They will come." Tom swallowed hard. "How long?" She opened her eyes again. "I do not know." Tom nodded. "Then we wait." Hours passed. Tom dozed against the wall, while Mira rested on her blanket. Sometimes he woke and looked out at the stars. Each time, he wondered if he would see something, a ship, a light, anything. But the sky stayed quiet. Then, just before dawn, Mira sat up sharply. Her eyes were wide, glowing brighter than he had ever seen. "They are here," she said in a trembling voice. Tom's heart jumped. He stood and stepped to the doorway. At first, he saw nothing. But then, far over the trees, a soft silver light grew brighter. It moved smoothly across the sky, coming closer. The light grew and stretched until it looked like a long ribbon of brightness. Mira clutched his arm. "It is my family." The light drifted over the clearing. The grass bent under an invisible force. A gentle wind moved around the barn. The old boards creaked, but nothing broke. Slowly, the silver glow folded in on itself and became a bright doorway floating in the air. Shapes moved inside it, tall figures too bright to see clearly. Tom swallowed. His mouth was dry. The light shifted, and 3 beings stepped through the doorway. They were taller than Mira, their silver skin shining in the dawn. They wore long cloaks that moved like water. One of them carried a staff that glowed at the tip. Mira let go of Tom's arm and stepped forward. Her voice broke as she called out, words he couldn't understand. The tallest figure opened their arms. Mira rushed to them and fell into their embrace. Tom felt something heavy and strange in his chest. Happiness for Mira, sadness that this moment meant she would soon leave. The 3 beings spoke in low, musical voices. The tall one Mira hugged stepped forward and looked at Tom. Though their face was smooth and alien, Tom felt sure they were. Studying him carefully, Mira turned back to him, her eyes bright with tears. She touched her translator and spoke in English again. "This is my mother," she said softly. "She thanks you." The tall figure lifted one graceful hand and placed it over their heart. The gesture felt respectful, almost sacred. Tom nodded. Awkwardly, I was just trying to help." Mira's mother stepped closer. She raised her staff. A warm light wrapped around Tom, like a gentle wave. He felt no pain, only a strange peace. The light faded. Mira's mother began to speak in her own language. Mira translated, her voice shaking. "You saved her life. In our tradition, this is the highest bond. You are now Savior's spouse." Tom's eyes widened. "Savior? What?" Mira stepped closer. "It is not only marriage," she said quickly, seeing his confusion. "It is a sacred tie. You are forever family to me. To all my people." Tom felt dizzy. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Mira reached for his hand. "You have no fear," she said gently. "It is honor. You can return to your life, or you can come with us." He looked at the bright doorway. It led to a world he could not imagine. He looked back at Mira and her family. Their eyes were kind, patient, waiting for his answer. "Why me?" he asked in a whisper. Mira smiled softly. "Because you cared when no one else did." Tom took a long breath. The sun rose higher, filling the clearing with golden light. For the first time, he realized this was not the end of something. It was the start. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted. Mira's mother stepped forward. Her voice was calm, musical. Mira translated, "Then you are ready." Tom felt the last bit of fear slip away. He was just a mechanic, an ordinary man. But he had done something extraordinary. And maybe that meant he was ready for whatever came after. Tom stood in the old barn doorway, blinking in the bright morning light. He felt like he was standing between 2 worlds. Behind him was everything familiar, his workshop, his truck, his quiet life. In front of him, the shimmering portal, and Mira's tall, graceful family waited with calm, shining eyes. The tallest one, Mira's mother, still held her glowing staff. She stepped forward again. Her voice was musical, gentle. Mira touched her translator and spoke carefully. She says, "You are welcome. You may come with us to our world." Tom rubbed his hands together, feeling the cold sweat on his palms. What would I do there? He asked, his voice unsteady. Myra turned to look up at her mother, then back at him. Anything you wish. You are Savior's spouse. Our people will honor you. You may learn with us, stay with us, or return here and be part of both worlds. Tom stared at the shimmering doorway. The edges of it rippled like water. He felt as if he were standing on the edge of a vast ocean, unable to see what lay beyond. What about you? He asked softly. Myra's eyes glowed brighter. I will go home. But you will always be welcome. You are part of my family now. He tried to imagine it, walking among tall silver beings in cities made of light, learning their ways. But he also thought of his little house, his tools, the roads he knew by heart. He felt something tug inside him. Myra's mother lowered her staff. She extended her other hand toward Tom. Mira translated again. She offers you a gift, in thanks. Tom looked down and saw her hand open, palm up. A small round object rested there, no bigger than a stone. It glowed soft blue, just like Mira's eyes. What is it? Tom asked. Mira smiled. A key. It can open a path between our worlds. So you may visit, or call for us if you need help. Tom's throat felt tight. Slowly, he reached out and took the small glowing key. It was warm in his hand. As he held it, he felt a strange comfort, as if he was not so alone anymore. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. Myra's mother bowed her head. Myra stepped closer. She reached out and touched Tom's cheek with her cool silver fingers. I will never forget, she whispered. He swallowed hard. Neither will I. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then Mira turned and faced the bright doorway. The other two beings stepped in first, disappearing into the light without a sound. Mira's mother followed, pausing only to look back at Tom with gentle eyes. Then it was Mira's turn. She looked over her shoulder one last time. Her blue eyes were bright, and her voice shook a little when she spoke. Goodbye, for now. Tom nodded. Goodbye, Mira. She stepped forward and vanished into the portal. The barn was quiet again. Tom stood alone, the little blue key resting in his palm. The portal began to shrink, folding in on itself. A faint wind stirred the dust around him. Then the light faded, and only the morning sun remained. He felt like someone had pressed pause on his life. Everything looked the same, the old boards, the crates, the blanket Mira had used, but he knew nothing would ever really be the same again. For a while, he just stood there, trying to collect his thoughts. He thought of the day he found Mira in the forest, small and afraid. He thought of the nights in the barn, fixing the beacon together. And he thought of her last look, the promise in her eyes. Tom closed his hand around the key. Slowly, he gathered the supplies he had brought. He folded the blanket carefully and tucked it under his arm. He stepped out into the clearing, breathing in the cool air. The grass still showed faint circles where the portal had stood. He knew someday people would come here searching for answers. But he also knew they wouldn't find much. The ship was gone. The beings were gone. And he had promised Mira he would keep her secret safe. He loaded the supplies back into his truck. When he climbed into the driver's seat, he sat quietly for a long moment, staring out at the trees. He thought of all the questions he still had about Mira's people, about the bond he now shared with them, about what it meant to be called a savior spouse. Then he remembered Mira's words. You are not alone. For the first time in days, Tom felt a calm settle over him. He started the truck and drove slowly back toward town. When he reached his workshop, everything looked the same as he had left it. The tools were still neatly arranged on the benches. The old radio still sat in pieces. He set the folded blanket down on the work table. Then he opened his hand and looked again at the small blue key. He didn't know when he would use it. Maybe days from now. Maybe years. But he knew he would. That night he sat on his porch, staring up at the sky. The stars looked different to him now. They were no longer just distant points of light. Somewhere out there was Myra's home, a place where he would always be welcome. Tom smiled softly. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. He closed his hand around the key again. Whatever came next, he knew he would face it without fear. Because sometimes helping someone, even a stranger from the stars, was enough to change everything. And deep inside, he was ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Days passed slowly after Mira left through the portal. Tom felt a quiet emptiness in his small workshop. The silence was heavy, but he didn't feel alone. The small blue key lay on the work table, glowing softly like a gentle promise. Every night, Tom would sit outside on his porch, looking up at the stars. The sky seemed fuller now, filled with hope and new possibilities. He knew Mira was out there, somewhere among those shining points of light, and that one day they might meet again. One afternoon, as Tom was fixing an old engine part in his workshop, the small blue key began to glow brighter. It pulsed like a heartbeat, warm and alive in his palm. His heart skipped a beat. He remembered Mira's words. "You are not alone." Tom stood up and walked outside. The sunlight was soft, and the wind rustled the leaves. As he looked around, he saw something he hadn't noticed before, a faint shimmer, like heat waves rising from the grass near the edge of the forest. Curious, he moved closer. The shimmer grew stronger until it formed a glowing doorway, the same kind of portal that Mira had used to return to her people. His breath caught in his throat. The portal flickered softly and then stabilized. Tom felt a wave of calm wash over him. This was a message, a sign that his life was about to change again. Suddenly, a figure stepped out. It was Mira. Her silver skin shone in the sunlight. Her blue eyes smiled warmly as she looked at Tom. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "I am here." Tom smiled widely. "I never forgot you." Mira stepped forward and took his hand. "Now you must come with me." Tom looked back toward his workshop, his home, the place where everything had started. But he knew it was time. Time to leave the life he had known and step into the unknown. Together, they walked through the portal. The light wrapped around them like a gentle wave, lifting them up and carrying them away from Earth. When the light faded, Tom found himself standing in a place unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall silver towers stretched into the sky. The air smelled fresh and clean. Soft music filled the air, and beings like Mira moved gracefully around him. Mira smiled and said, "Welcome home." Tom felt awe and peace. He knew this new world held challenges, but also great beauty and friendship. He was ready to learn, to grow, and to be part of something bigger. In the days that followed, Tom met many of Myra's people. They welcomed him with kindness and respect. He learned about their culture, their technology, and their hopes for peace between their worlds. Though he was far from Earth, Tom never forgot where he came from. He kept the small blue key close, a symbol of the bond between two worlds and the power of kindness. And every night, under alien stars, Tom smiled, knowing that sometimes the smallest actions, a helping hand, a kind heart, could change the fate of many. His journey was just beginning, and for the first time, he was truly ready.